Right now, your brain is being hijacked, not by a drug, not by alcohol, by something you had this morning, something you will probably have again tonight, something that activates the exact same neural reward pathway as addictive substances. And the most terrifying part is that your brain has already rewired itself around it. It has already changed its structure, chemistry, and decision-making to keep you coming back for more. Today I am going to show you exactly what sugar is doing inside your brain. What happens to your neural pathways in the first 24 hours without it? What happens in the first week? And what your brain actually looks like after 30 days clean. Because the transformation is not just psychological, it is physical, measurable, visible on a brain scan. Let me start with something that will permanently change how you think about your morning coffee or your afternoon biscuit. Your brain has a reward system. It is called the mesolimbic dopamine pathway, and it evolved over millions of years to reward you for behaviours that kept you alive. Eating food, reproducing, socialising. Every time you do something survival critical, it releases dopamine and you feel pleasure. This is normal. This is healthy. This is how you are supposed to work. Here is what sugar does to that system. When refined sugar enters your bloodstream and reaches your brain, it triggers a massive dopamine release, which is the brain's primary pleasure and reward centre, that is dramatically larger than what natural food triggers. Studies using brain imaging have shown that sugar activates the same reward circuitry as addictive drugs. The dopamine spike from sugar is fast, intense and short. It peaks and then crashes, and when it crashes, your brain notices. It registers the absence of that surge as a form of discomfort, a craving, a need, and it begins changing its structure to ensure you go back for more. This structural change is what makes sugar so uniquely dangerous. With repeated sugar consumption, the brain does something called downregulation. It reduces the number and sensitivity of dopamine receptors in the reward pathway. This happens because the brain is trying to protect itself from the overstimulation. But the result is that you now need more sugar to feel the same pleasure you once got from less. The threshold keeps rising, the baseline keeps dropping. This is addiction. And it happens with sugar in ways measurable on brain scans within weeks. Now here is what happens when you stop. The first 24 to 72 hours is genuinely one of the hardest periods your brain will go through because your dopamine system has been calibrated around a constant sugar supply. When that supply disappears, the brain experiences what neuroscientists call deficiency syndrome. Your reward pathway goes quiet, dramatically quiet. Things that should feel pleasurable feel flat, your mood drops, your energy disappears. Your focus becomes foggy and unreliable. You feel irritable and anxious. Many experience genuine headaches because blood sugar fluctuations affect cerebral blood flow. Your brain is going through actual neurochemical withdrawal from a substance it has become dependent on. During this same period, something else is happening at a microscopic level. Their job is to maintain brain tissue, clean up cellular debris and manage inflammation. When you consume sugar chronically, those microglia become chronically activated. They are constantly responding to the inflammatory signaling that sugar triggers. In this chronically activated state, they begin pruning synaptic connections that they should not be pruning. They are overactive, overzealous, and they damage neural tissue in the process. This is one of the mechanisms through which chronic sugar consumption has been linked to accelerated cognitive decline, increased risk of depression, and increased risk of Alzheimer's disease, which some researchers now call type 3 diabetes because of its strong association with insulin resistance in the brain. When you stop eating sugar, those microglia begin to calm down. The inflammatory signaling that was driving their overactivation begins to reduce. Within 72 hours of sugar elimination, researchers have measured significant reductions in brain inflammatory markers. This is not a slow process. The brain begins healing almost immediately when the primary inflammatory driver is removed. By day 4 and 5, something remarkable begins to happen that most people who have quit sugar describe as a kind of mental unlocking. The prefrontal cortex begins operating more efficiently. Here is why. Chronic sugar consumption impairs prefrontal cortex function through two mechanisms. First, the insulin resistance that sugar promotes affects the brain's ability to use glucose efficiently. Second, the chronic dopamine dysregulation caused by sugar makes the prefrontal cortex less able to override impulse signals. This is why people who consume high amounts of sugar consistently report difficulty concentrating, difficulty making decisions, difficulty resisting other impulses, and persistent mental fog. It is not laziness. It is a pharmacological effect of sugar on your prefrontal cortex. And when sugar is removed, those mechanisms begin reversing by day 4 and 5. By the end of week 1, the hippocampus begins showing measurable recovery. The hippocampus is your primary memory formation and learning center. It is one of the most metabolically active structures and most vulnerable to damage from sugar. Studies have shown that high sugar diets reduce hippocampal neurogenesis and impair synaptic plasticity, the ability of neural connections to strengthen. This is why people who consume high sugar diets perform worse on memory tests and learning tasks. And it is why people who eliminate sugar report that their memory improves and information seems to stick better. This is not placebo. The hippocampus is physically recovering its function. During week 2, something shifts in your relationship with food itself that goes deeper than willpower. Your gut microbiome has been dramatically changed by a week without sugar. The bacteria that feed on refined sugars begin dying off. The bacteria that support serotonin production, dopamine regulation, and anti-inflammatory signaling begin thriving. 90% of your serotonin is produced in your gut. Serotonin is your primary mood-stabilizing neurotransmitter. When your gut bacteria recover, your baseline mood begins to lift from the bottom, not from the top like a sugar spike. The baseline itself rises. This is why people who eliminate sugar describe a new kind of calm. The floor of their emotional state has risen. No more highs and lows. By week 3, the dopamine system has begun genuine structural recovery. Studies show D2 receptor density and sensitivity begins recovering within 3 to 4 weeks. This means the brain is rebuilding its ability to feel pleasure from normal stimuli, from exercise, from social connection. Things that felt flat begin feeling genuinely satisfying. A walk outside produces a genuine mood lift. This is not just psychological adjustment. This is measurable neurochemical recovery happening in your reward system. By day 30, brain imaging studies comparing high sugar consumers with people who eliminated sugar show significant differences. The inflammatory markers in brain tissue are lower, hippocampal volume is better preserved. Connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and the reward centers has increased. The thinking brain has regained control. The hijacking is reversing, your brain is coming back to you. The brain changes caused by sugar do not fully reverse in 30 days, some take months. But 30 days is enough time to feel a fundamentally different brain. Enough time to understand your cognition without interference. The most common thing people say is that they feel like themselves again, like there was a version of them they had forgotten existed. Clearer, calmer, more able to focus, more emotionally stable, more present. What they are describing is not a lack of willpower. It is a neurologically altered brain asking for the drug it has been programmed to need. And now you know exactly what happens when that person finally says no. Share this for neurological awareness.